Thank you, Sean. That's a nice introduction. I was thinking about the gold idea and the Oval Office. So, of course, we can work on bringing gold to the Oval Office as long as it's Canadian gold and that it goes through U.S. Customs. So, we'll see what we can do. Ça me fait plaisir de vous voir ici. It's really a pleasure to be back in Toronto. And it's a pleasure to be at the Canadian Club. Of course, I'm here with Karim Berdizi, who is my parliamentary secretary. So Karim, thank you. There's also my former colleague and great friend, Marco Mendicino. So good to see you, Marco. You were a great surprise this morning. And there's a man I really like a lot, who's my mentor, and he made me the surprise to be here also. So Frank McKenna, everybody knows Frank, so thank you. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you, leaders that understand a simple truth, that economic strength is the backbone of national strength. Because we know that the old playbook that we've been following does not apply anymore. We're living in a much more complicated, complex, and dangerous world. And Sean was referring to it a bit earlier. And I've seen it firsthand, having done diplomacy for the past 4 years and being your foreign minister. I used to be on the diplomatic front of the trade tensions, and now I'm much more on the economic front of these trade tensions. I used to work on the causes, and now I'm working much more on the consequences. And I've seen the security environment of the world deteriorate over the last few years with wars and also much more economic tensions. And we know that security and economy go hand in hand. So when you think about it, all our old alliances don't necessarily work anymore. And this concept of an ever-expanding consumer base through free trade is in jeopardy. So, what do we do? Because fundamentally, we need to create economic growth in our country. It is important for us to be able to offer ourselves and Canadians a just society, a social safety net, for Canadians to be able to trust each other, to be able to care for one another, and ultimately to keep peace at home. Donc, ce filet social auquel je fais référence est très, très important. Mais il ne peut pas être présenté sans parler de croissance économique. Et c'est aujourd'hui le but de ma conférence, de pouvoir parler de l'impact et comment on crée de la croissance économique. So we know that we'll continue to deal with uncertainty. That will be your business realities. This will be definitely the government's reality. And we know that there are things we cannot control, but there are a lot of things we can control. So let's focus on that. Let's focus on what we can control. And so our mission, if you heard the Prime Minister saying it, is to build one strong Canadian economy. And we have everything any country on earth would like to have. Obviously, we have the great people, the talent, natural resources, gold. We have also peace, order, and good government. So let's make sure that we play to our strength. And let's make sure also that we can work on a very important plan. And here's the plan. First, we will protect. Second, we will create. And third, we will attract. Donc, le plan a 3 piliers. Le premier, on va protéger. Deuxièmement, on va créer. Et troisièmement, on va faire en sorte d'attirer. So let's start with the first pillar, protect. Protect industries and protect jobs. So I know my colleague Dominic LeBlanc is still in Washington. Spoke to him this morning. He's with the clerk, Michael Sabia, and the negotiations are continuing. So while all this is happening, we know that we still have sectors of the economy that are victims of tariffs. And in our own jargon, it's the 232 tariffs. So the sectors, we all know which are the sectors. So basically it's steel, aluminum, auto, lumber, and copper. And here's what we're going to do. Short term, we will protect our market. We'll make sure that we support these industries, these businesses in these sectors. Middle term, we need to make sure that they adapt and pivot. They need to be able to go towards new markets, and they need to be able to develop new products. And we're putting money on the table with a new strategic response fund of $5 billion, and also with support through our regional development agencies. And here in the Toronto area, it is FedDev. And finally, longer term, we need to be relentless in building a domestic market, making sure that we can have the right domestic market through our defense investments, our Buy Canada policy, our housing strategy, and our national major projects. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Think about steel. There are a couple of very important plants across the country. One that is Canadian-owned and very dear to Ontario and very dear to Sault Ste. Marie is Algoma. Algoma Steel. Algoma Steel, we just invested to make sure that they would have loan support, $400 million. But you know what? Well, Algoma Steel business model was basically linked to the US auto market. Last week, they got a new order of steel from Irving Shipyard in Halifax, who is basically building Canadian frigates for our Navy. It's a beginning. Obviously, it's not the only solution, but we need more of that. And they now have an MOU with Seaspan, which is the other shipyard on the Pacific side in Vancouver. I was talking to you about the importance of developing also new markets. Trade diversification is happening. I'll give you another example. In aluminum, Alouette, much more north part of Quebec. Alouette Q1 of this year was exporting a vast majority of its production to US, only 4% to Europe. Q2, 57% of its production is being sent to Europe. So folks, it can happen, even in a very important sector such as aluminum. Indeed. And I know that many of you are linked or involved in the auto sector. Let me be super clear. We will fight for every single jobs in the auto sector. We will make sure that we work with the workers, with labor movement, with the plants, with the companies, with the industries, because we know that we need to be there for the auto sector. And we've been there. When we had countermeasures, we've developed a remission system. And Marco, you were involved in that. And on the Strategic Response Fund also that we've put on the table a month ago, we're looking at making the right strategic investments in these plants. But let me be, again, super, super clear. The Ontario economy cannot go well if the auto sector doesn't go well. We all know that. But I'm from Quebec. I understand that if the Ontario economy doesn't go well, the economy of the country doesn't go well. So that's why we'll fight and make sure that we have a strong auto sector here in Ontario. So while we're still in the, the first part of the plan, which is to protect jobs, my message is basically we won't let these industries down. And we will do that for the sake of our workers, of our industries, and for our nation. Donc, nous serons là aux côtés des travailleurs, aux côtés des compagnies, des industries, parce que c'est important pour eux, mais c'est important aussi pour notre pays. Now, the second pillar of this plan, create. Create jobs, and of course, even create industries. In every single crisis, there is an opportunity. We need to act with audacity, a sense of purpose, and determination. And we need to make sure that we have control over things, because we know there are things we cannot control, but creating jobs is something we can control. And we can do it three ways. And I'll start by talking about our investments in defense, because we will be investing in defense like never before. And when I talk about defense, let's be very clear. It is about dealing with all different threats that can be against Canada. So it means obviously land, sea, and air. It means cyber. It also means threats to our health, like pandemics, or even climate change impacts such as wildfires. So we have a large definition of defense. We will be working on a defense industrial strategy. And in the context of this defense industrial strategy, we will be buying, so it's buy, build, and partner. What do I mean by that? So when we're looking at the military capabilities of our Canadian Armed Forces, sometimes there are things that we don't already build in Canada. So obviously we need to buy. The best example is our submarine procurement right now. And now there are two companies that are competing to have access to our market, to our procurement. It's either from Germany and Norway, which is the consortium led by TKMS, or from South Korea, Hanwha. We will make sure that notwithstanding whether it's TKMS or Hanwha, that there will be Canadian content, that Canadian companies will be part of the supply chain, and ultimately we'll have IP control and we'll create jobs through that procurement. So this is to buy. Now, we can build even more with our money, which is basically our investments in defense. And so I was referring to our shipyards. We've been having a national shipbuilding strategy for 15 years at this point. We have Irving building great ships on the Atlantic side. We have Seaspan on the Pacific side in Vancouver. And we have Davy in Quebec City. They're building world-class ships and Arctic icebreakers. At this point, what we want from these shipyards is not only to help develop the military capabilities of our brave men and women serving our armed forces, it's more than that. They need to export. All countries on Earth are increasing their defense spending, well, particularly all countries of NATO. So there's a market out there. There's maturity with our shipbuilding industry, and that's why we're thinking also of helping them export. We know that we can do even more. De Havilland in Calgary is building fantastic water bombers. You know these Canadian water bombers that we saw in LA? Calgary manufactured. So we can make sure that we build the water bombers here. We can also build the right satellites. I know somebody from the MDA space is here now. So we want to make sure that we build for Canada, but also for the world. And we're thinking obviously about AI, and we have a great Canadian company that is called Cohere, which is from Ontario, and we'll make sure that we build Cohere. And finally, we will partner. And sometimes we can be stronger through a joint venture. So what we're seeing right now is Bombardier and a Swedish company called Saab are working together to develop the best surveillance plane in the world, which is called the Global Eye. UAE just bought 2. France just bought, and other countries, I'm hearing, are also very interested. We need to make sure that we partner with Sweden on this, because there's a market. We will build these planes here and also in Sweden, and we'll make sure that we sell it to the world. So buy, build, partner. This is how we'll be creating jobs through a defense industrial strategy. Donc, on va acheter, on va bâtir, et on va faire des partenariats. So we know that we can build the best ships, the best planes, the best drones, and have very strong supply chains across the country. We can have researchers, engineers, and welders at work. We can have the BDC, and we will have the BDC, our research councils, and the Canadian Space Agency that will be involved in supporting this ecosystem. And we just announced a new defense investment agency to make sure that we're going faster, and ultimately we will use the power of procurement to create jobs. Because ultimately what I've learned is companies rather have contracts than subsidies from the government. So we're still talking about creating jobs. We're still in the second pillar of the plan. We've talked about the defense industrial strategy. Something that is really important to the Prime Minister is definitely major projects. So you've heard what we're doing to build one strong Canadian economy. And also, we've passed Bill C-5 to make sure that approval of projects could be faster. We've put into place the project office. We now have a new president, Don Farrell. We've approved 5 projects, and they're in energy, mining, transport. And just through this first tranche of 5 projects, $60 billion of private investments, thousands of jobs. So in Ontario, Canada will be the first G7 country building small modular reactors in Darlington. 3,000 jobs. That's where we all clap. And of course, we're talking about the high-speed train between Toronto and Quebec City. Donc, on parle bien entendu aussi de grands projets, puis lorsqu'on parle de grands projets, on parle du train à grande vitesse entre Toronto et Québec. And the next round of new projects will be coming up on the Grey Cup. And I know not everybody knows necessarily when the Grey Cup is, but it's November 16, so it's coming soon. So we will be creating thousands of jobs in engineering, construction, and throughout supply chains with SMEs. And we will be building communities, and we will be working with Indigenous communities, which is so important because they need to be able to be at the decision table. We'll make sure that they have that space at the decision table, that they can have equity stakes in these major projects and develop economic development levers that are so important for Indigenous communities across the country. This is reconciliation in action. And so, meanwhile, while we're working on all these major projects, think about steel and aluminum. This will increase also the demand, and therefore, we need to make sure that they work, the different steel companies together with all these major project proponents. And finally, when it comes to create jobs, we will be building Canadian champions. And I know this is something that a government official has not necessarily talked a lot about in the past because it was a bit taboo. But hey, folks, I'm from Montreal. And we're very proud of having very strong Canadian companies, such as CGI, CAE, Alimentation Couche-Tard, Bombardier. We need more of that. In Toronto, we have, indeed, an Eagle, super important. We have Thomson Reuters, we have Maple Leaf Foods. Across the country, we have Aritzia, Lululemon. We need more. We need to scale these companies. We need bigger Canadian companies. And we need to make sure that these companies become bigger and at the same time that we have more of these Canadian champions. Why? Obviously to create jobs here at home. Obviously to create jobs around the world. But in a much more complicated world, what do we need? We need to increase our influence. We need more soft power. And that is why building strong Canadian companies is important. And we will make sure that we open markets for them, that we promote them, that we help them grow, and ultimately that they're strong at home and abroad. Third pillar of the plan, attract. Attract investment, attract talent. Let's start with attracting talent. As other countries are undermining academic freedom and research, we will invest and we will double down. We believe in science and we believe in research. And Karim and I, yes, indeed. And Karim and I have been working a lot, meeting universities and researchers, and we know that they're also extremely important to our education system, but also to our economy. Our goal is to attract the best talent on earth and to grow even more our homegrown talents. So we will work on attracting even more talent from the rest of the world. Stay tuned, I'll have more to say in the coming weeks on that. And finally, my last point on attracting investment. We know that investors are looking right now at de-risking, and some of them are much more exposed to certain markets. And we can help them de-risk. We can offer investment certainty. We can reduce red tape, and we will do so. We can offer much more transparency, and we will. And we can speed up permitting, and we will be doing that working with different levels of governments and also with Indigenous communities. Ultimately, what investors are looking at is also a stable environment with no surprises, and we can offer that. So we will make sure that we seize this opportunity. And my job in government is also to attract foreign direct investment, FDI, so we will be open for business, and we will attract investments from Europe, from Asia, and from the Gulf countries. And this will be good for Canadians, this will be good for Indigenous communities, and I really, really think that Canada is on the top, on the charts, on the top ranks to attract this type of foreign direct investments, because it's working. If you hear what the CEO of CPPIB was just saying recently, we continue to see Canada as one of the best places in the world to put capital at work. Et ça marche. Desjardins récemment mentionnait que le marché des actifs canadien est de plus en plus perçu comme une destination stable et plus sûre pour les capitaux étrangers. So we will attract more investment. In conclusion, my message to you is let's work together on building one strong Canadian economy. And we can do so by protecting, by creating, and by attracting. I brought you my best ideas. I really hope you challenge me and that you challenge us, because this is an important moment. These are not abstract policies. We have a vision, we have a plan. These are real investments in real people that will generate real growth right here at home. We have a generational challenge to solve, but a generational opportunity to seize. So let's work together. Merci tout le monde. Merci. Yes? Thank you. Thank you. Let's put that, yep. Thank you. Go. Thank you.
Wow, that was a historic speech. Thank you. I think we are going to look back on today and remember this 20 to 30 years from now as the start of the next chapter for Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, I think just for the group, I think we might go a bit beyond 1:30, just as you're planning your time. And what a treat and an honor to be able to do this Q&A with you. Minister, you talked a lot about building companies here and protecting and creating and attracting. How are you thinking about the global sort of friction that's happening and this idea of what we've seen maybe historically as innovation drift? How do organizations, how are you thinking about keeping companies here that may see opportunity beyond our borders?
Well, and I'm sorry for those that are more there.
Here.
I hope, let's go.
We can move.
Yeah, we can move, we can move. Okay, good. Well, I think we have a tendency to think that the relationship with the U.S. is a Canada-U.S. relationship only, and we see it through the lens. But every single country on earth is reacting to what's going on in the U.S. And all of them are developing new industrial policies. And some of them have not reacted yet by developing their plan, because they're in wait-and-see mode, and at the same time, I think a lot of them think that the old world will be something that basically there's no real rupture, and that we will be going back to where we were. That won't happen, folks. It won't. And so that's why I'm talking about a generational challenge and an opportunity to seize. And the Prime Minister has mentioned, it is a rupture. It is a rupture. So we need to start thinking differently. And of course, we've been reacting, playing defense, and that's why I was talking about protecting. But we need to be on the offense side, and we need to make sure that we create jobs. And while we're doing that, and while, I was referring to the defense industrial strategy, which I really think is a fantastic opportunity to rebuild a lot of our manufacturing sector that we lost over years. And, when I talk about defense, I've mentioned a couple of companies, but there's also the critical mineral sector that is really, really important, and the mining sector, which is kind of so strong. And if you look at the TSX, I think it's the best place to invest in mining in the world. Thank you, Sean, for saying yes.
Yes.
I feel validated. But at the same time, I think at the same time that, I know there's been a taboo about economic nationalism, but this is the moment because we have no choice. And I think a lot of countries in the world will be doing that. So we need to keep open markets with them, but at the same time, we can't be naive, and we need to take care of our own economy and our own workers.
Related.
Yep.
How are you thinking about interprovincial trade? You mentioned, in your auto example where, auto is an Ontario industry, but we also know that, when Ontario does well, the country does well. How are you thinking about that going across all of the provinces and creating more seamlessness for trade in the country?
Well, I think the Canadian government has done its part recently, and my former minister colleague, Christopher Freeland, worked on internal trade a lot. We were able to get rid of internal trade barriers before July 1st, and that was a big commitment that the Prime Minister made during the campaign. But I think that's where all of you come in. And I was meeting with all the chambers of commerce from the country, yesterday, and that was my pitch to them. You are part of this. There's so much a government can do. At the end of the day, businesses need to trust each other, leaders need to meet and get to know each other, and that's how they do business together. If your entire contact, book is about people in the South, and you don't have any East or West, well, you have your answer. So I think, there can be a better job between Quebec and Ontario, and Ontario with the West, and all the different provinces and territories. I think it's really important. And I think that our country is so big that rarely Canadians have the chance to travel it. Unless you're a federal minister or an MP, you don't necessarily see the breadth of the country. It's you have an idea of it, but you don't necessarily have a knowledge of it. And that's what we need to be able to do. We need to be able to create these meetings, these relations. And I
tighter bonds.
Absolutely. And that's my pitch to the business community, to make sure that that is a mission that we can actually take on together.
Wonderful, wonderful. How will you track, just a question here, how will you track and measure that protect, create, attract?
Well, there's obviously, we're result-oriented, and we'll follow the number of jobs being created and GDP growth, and we'll look at all these different indexes. But at the end of the day, it will be based on trust of Canadians, because that's the number one issue that they're dealing with, the economy. And when you think about the relationship with the U.S. and why it's so important in people's eyes, it's because of the economy. So that's how we will be able to track. And at the same time, we need to be faster in our way of offering opportunities to the business sector. That's something that is extremely top of mind. And so we have to make sure that we are scaling and also that the pace is faster.
Wonderful. When we think about 5 to 10 years from now and protect, create, attract
Yep.
has been implemented, and we see more Canadian champions here. What does Canada look like then?
I really think that, I think the world will continue to be much more complicated because of the decisions that the American government is taking regarding its engagement in the world, which creates necessarily tensions. But I really think that there will be a realignment. And I think that we have something unique in our country, which is our people, and the fact that we have very strong social cohesion and trust. And that's also why I was talking about the importance of economic growth to keep our social safety net, because that's the promise of our country. That's the social contract that unites us. It's the government being able to help the private sector to really do its work, have a very strong economic growth, but at the same time, we can't do it alone. And we can't have, Canadians cannot just increase the burden of social programs on their shoulder. As we're dealing with normally an unpredictable world will have economic consequences, and therefore it will slow down the economy. No, if we're really strong and able to put in place this plan, we'll be able to, overcome the hurdles and ultimately make sure that we're the best country on earth. And, we can have a strong military complex here at home and be a progressive country. Sweden, before it joined NATO, and it joined NATO 3 years ago, had a very strong military industry at home, and they still do. And they built the planes, the ships, the drones, everything that is required, because that was their way to show deterrence against Russia. Well, we can do that here too. We used to do that. After the Second World War, we were top 3 in terms of military aerospace. We had at one point the Avro Aero project, which I'm very fond of, and that we had to let go. But now, as we will be investing more, I think we need to dream big and build at home even more.
What are our biggest challenges to get there?
Well, there's a lot of things we can't control, and that's definitely what, you never know what will be read on Truth Social. You just don't know.
Yeah.
But when things are being said by US officials, you have to take them for their word. And you have to take that very seriously. So, that's why I was saying a simple truth. Economic strength is at the backbone of national strength. So we need to have a strong economy to have a strong country. And so, being lazy or doing things as we've been doing and being over-dependent on the US is one of the biggest challenges we have.
Yeah. Building trust with other people around the world.
Of course. And I think there's a lot of interest around the world for what we have to offer. Of course, in natural resources, major projects. I think we can develop not only critical minerals, but transformation of critical minerals at home. When we put ourselves at it, Canadians are really, really, determined people. We play by the rules. We're fearless, we're determined, and I think that we should have that same ethos while, developing our stronger economic sovereignty.
Wonderful. Minister Joly, thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you for sharing your vision
Thank
and your
you.
insights, unlocking the economic potential and building industries of the future here in this wonderful country. Your leadership reminds us of all the opportunities ahead. So thank you. We are honored you could come and join us for this lunch today.
Thank you, and I'm honored to be with a strong woman as well on this
Amazing.
stage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.